Hello, welcome, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Welcome everybody to this donor impact session. So glad that you could join us. We're going to have a little bit of a WWF Canada year in review. My name is Megan Leslie. I am President and CEO of WWF Canada. I'm so glad that all of you are able to join me. I'm coming to you from our Toronto office. So here I am. This is on the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. And I think it's really important to note that I'm going to be talking about waters and lands across this country that are the traditional homelands of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations, and they're home to diverse Indigenous peoples today. So that needs to be front and center in our minds when we do our conservation work at WWF and also in our discussion today. So let's get started. I know that there's a chat function on this software we're using, and I see that people are already in the chat. I had a quick look before I sat down. I know people are joining us from Montreal, and I see friends from Caledon and Calgary, some folks from Nova Scotia. So chat box is for chatting. Get in there, say hello, let us know where you're from, where you're joining us from. So we're really happy to host you today as we look at where we've come from in 2023, what we've accomplished together, some of our conservation successes, and looking forward to the new year. Nous sommes très heureux que vous soyez avec nous pour célébrer nos gains en conservation en 2023. And wow, do we ever have a lot to celebrate? Nous avons beaucoup à célébrer. On a personal note, I just celebrated my 8-year anniversary with WWF Canada, and over these 8 years, I'm constantly amazed at how our supporters, how you show up for us. Each year, I get to see the enthusiasm that you have for this planet and the work that we do, and I'm telling you, it gets us to increase our ambition. It gets us to think bigger, and I'm so appreciative of that. Your ongoing support has a direct benefit on wildlife and nature, and I just want to say thanks. You are helping species like the musky muskox. Say that 3 times fast. The chorus frog, who wants to let you know that it's around. The short-eared owl with its sharp eyes, and even native prairie grasses that float on the wind. So thanks to you, we are able to do work to restore and protect nature for benefiting wildlife and benefiting climate by both making sure we have habitat for wildlife and also locking carbon into those ecosystems and combating climate change. So today you'll hear about some of the important work that we're doing. Our agenda, it's pretty simple. I'm going to first share some of the incredible ways that you showed up for us. Then I'm going to talk about what some of our successes were in 2023. Then we will get a glimpse into the future, what I'm excited about for 2024. And then we are also going to do a little Q&A session at the end. So feel free to pop those questions in the chat. I know that there are some WWF Canada experts online right now, and they might just go ahead and answer some of your questions as we're going through, and I'll take some questions at the end. Alors, je vais présenter en anglais aujourd'hui, but there are folks in the chat who can answer some questions in French and English, our deux langues officielles, so feel free to pop in either language. All right, let's get started. So first up, that's a goat on the screen. No, we are not suddenly launching a new initiative to help goats. This goat is actually a WWF supporter. Remember our Race for Wildlife where people could walk, run, bike, or wheel to support nature? Well, goats Clara and Wolfie live in Newfoundland, and they participated in the Race for Wildlife, of course, with their owners and longtime WWF Canada supporters, Tal and Michelle. So Tal told our staff that he and Michelle walk their goats 2 to 4 times a day so they can enjoy foraging on the salty coast. And they were inspired to walk with Clara and Wolfie to raise money for all the wild animals out there. Ah, I see the panda logo. I spotted it there. Look at those sweet goat faces. It's always fun to see how people are inspired to take action for wildlife and nature. So I want to say a special thank you to Clara and Wolfie. You're the goat. There are a lot of you who took action for nature this year. And you might think, well, how does that individual action fit in the bigger picture? Let's watch this video that will show exactly how that action ladders up for big impact. Support like this that you're offering to us is making a difference for wildlife, whether it's salmon or polar bears or whales or even tiny little pollinators. And I just want to say thank you for that support over the years. Now, we've had a lot of successes, especially this past year, but there's still a lot on our plates. We've got to stop and reverse both wildlife loss and climate change. But luckily, nature plays an important role in both those things. Now, in 2023, last year, it started off with this big international agreement where the global community committed to restoring and protecting a third of nature by 2030. So that's a global agreement. We have to act on it in Canada as well. And we just have 7 years to do it. So we got to get going on it. Now, last year at WWF, we spent part of the year looking at, do we have the conditions for success? Can we achieve those targets in an ethical way? And because you are our supporters, you know that we believe that Indigenous-led conservation, Indigenous-led restoration is key, not just to conservation, but to making sure that we are acting on reconciliation as well. And this year, with your support, we were able to deepen that work with Indigenous leaders and communities around Canada. In central BC, we supported the Secwepemcúlecw Restoration and Stewardship Society, or SRSS, who planted 25,000 trees in areas that were destroyed by wildfire. This is home to badgers, screech owls, and peregrine falcons. We also supported Katzie First Nation in BC's Upper Pitt watershed to restore vital salmon habitat. In the Arctic, we saw continued progress on creating the 90,000 square kilometer Avik Inuit Protected and Conserved Area. Inuit Guardians are now monitoring the land and waters here, and members of the Talojoak Umarili Rijigut Association are meeting with federal ministers to secure protections for these lands and waters that are home to caribou, polar bear, muskox, and Arctic whales. In 2023, we released new research that identified lands across the country that, if we restore them, could have the greatest potential to store carbon and provide habitat for wildlife. Wildlife like the short-eared owl, chorus frog, and Chinook salmon. This isn't research just sitting on a shelf. It tells us where to direct our conservation efforts and advocacy for the future. And last year, we also awarded $300,000 to 3 technology innovators so they could put their technology to use for conservation. With these technologies, partners can measure how well their efforts manage or restore land, and it's also helping to sequester and store carbon. This information is going to help groups like the SRSS demonstrate how their work is helping wildlife and the fight against climate change. And here's a big win. We were successful in getting 20 oil and gas permits surrendered off the coast of BC. That means that these areas are now protected from oil and gas exploration, including the 9,000-year-old reefs in this area that exist nowhere else on Earth. And another win, 23,000 of you signed a petition to say that ships should no longer be allowed to dump waste in protected areas. The government heard us, and they announced they're going to create new standards for marine protection. We did that together. We also know that coastal ecosystems are habitat for wildlife. They have the potential to store carbon, blue carbon, so to speak. So we brought together 40 experts to create the first ever Canadian State of Knowledge report on blue carbon. And this report showed just how well coastal ecosystems store carbon. It's already driving interest in new efforts to conserve and restore them. And finally, we supported on-the-ground restoration projects through our Nature and Climate Grant Program, presented in partnership with Aviva Canada. The efforts have been incredible, including unpaving a former sawmill site on Vancouver Island to provide new habitat for wildlife, stabilizing degraded riverbanks in New Brunswick to prevent erosion and flooding, and restoring privately owned land in rural Ontario. Now, your contributions are the foundation for these successes and more. And incredibly, you're going beyond just donating. You are actively working with us for nature. Last year, 1.3, you took 1.3 million actions for nature and wildlife, whether it was through signing a petition or maybe participating in Regrow, which is our native plant program. Maybe you did some restoration in your schoolyard with a Go Wild grant, or maybe you became a Living Planet leader through our Living Planet at Campus program. Whether you are at home or at school or at work, you are finding countless ways to take direct action for wildlife with us, and we are incredibly grateful for that. Now, there is a lot of great work going on out there, but we want to highlight one thing. We've been working on a short documentary about our work with Katzie First Nation in BC, and I want to share a trailer for that work with you today.
If we don't do something now and conserve what little salmon we have left, one day there's not going to be any.
And where we're at today is in the upper pit, an ancestral place of our people.
There was a landslide on Blue Creek.
Best Chinook spawning habitat we have up here, and basically destroyed the whole bottom end of it.
There's been so much human impact on our landscapes.
You'll notice declines in overall habitat health.
Well, the Fraser is warming up to near lethal levels for salmon.
To the First Nations communities that rely on these, they need a place where these fish can come back to spawn.
And sad to say, we tell our kids what the salmon run used to be like here. It's only a story now.
And what we're looking to do is basically come up here and restore, repair, and maintain a lot of the important tributaries.
So that the salmon that do return have an area to spawn, an area to rear.
When I talk to the young ones, and I'll tell them I visited the upper pit, and I saw the pit lake sockeye up there.
Maybe it'll be the 1 degree that enables those fish to live. So we work together. Hopefully we can bring them back.
That work just fills my cups. I was invited to Katzie First Nation this fall for a community dinner to celebrate some of the early successes, and I got to hear firsthand from Katzie community members about how they see this work really as the beginning of something, the beginning of starting to heal the land. I hope that you find this work inspiring because we've got a lot of work to do in 2024 and we need all the inspiration that we can get. We're aiming to have a bigger year in 2024. Now, just to remind you, we are still working on our big, bold, ambitious campaign to regenerate Canada. We've got 3 main goals there. We're looking to restore and protect 100 million hectares of habitat. We want to store 30 million tons of carbon in those landscapes. And we're also looking to restore 1 million hectares of lost habitat. And I think the wildfires this summer showed us that we can't just work towards stewarding and protecting these lands. We also have to look at how we can restore these lands. We know that the restoration of damaged ecosystems in Canada is critical to reversing the loss of biodiversity, to supporting the priorities of Métis, Inuit, and First Nations, and to maximizing the uptake of ecosystem carbon from the atmosphere to fight climate change. We know from experience that restoration projects can be expensive, and we know that the organizations leading restoration efforts across the country are acting largely on their own without the perspective of how that work is contributing to collective results. Now, a few years ago, this was a similar problem that we saw with freshwater conservation in Canada. There were a lot of groups working on freshwater monitoring and conservation in isolation. And as a result, we had this fractured and inaccurate idea of freshwater health and threats in Canada. So WWF-Canada created a common database for sharing information between groups. And we used that database, also called the watershed reports, to identify areas where more action and support was needed. And from there, we were able to advocate for the creation of the Canada Water Agency. Now, we want to bring that same collaborative and data-driven approach to restoration. So this year, with your support, we'll begin bringing together landholders and rights holders in Canada to track, monitor and increase major restoration efforts to make sure we're on track to reach both our Regenerate Canada goals and our global goals for nature. All right, what else are we doing in 2024? Well, building on the success of that no dumping campaign, we will be introducing a new campaign about underwater noise. Many marine species use sound to sense their environment, to communicate, to find prey and avoid predators. Their survival depends on it. And they can't do it that well when there's so much noise from ships, seismic blasts, and oil and gas exploration. So we need you to join us to demand that the government develop an underwater noise strategy for wildlife. We have a petition coming out in the coming weeks, and I hope we can count on all of you to sign it. We can't continue to delay action on underwater noise. Other work for 2024, well, our support for Indigenous-led conservation will continue to grow this year as we open the Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas Support Fund. As Indigenous communities think about protection for their lands, they need a wide range of support and resources, from mapping to knowledge exchanges between communities. So we created this fund to provide grants to Indigenous communities and organizations to get that important work done. We're aiming to facilitate discussion, overcome hurdles, and support capacity for long-term implementation of Indigenous knowledge and priorities in Canada. We'll also build on existing programs this year. We'll make it easier to measure the benefits of conservation for the climate by supporting Indigenous communities to monitor carbon in landscapes and seascapes. And we'll continue to support the SRSS as they scale up restoration efforts, where communities aim to plant 1 million trees per year by 2026 and 10 million per year, you heard me right, by 2030. It's so ambitious. And they're creating jobs, increasing community well-being along the way. These are just a few of the projects that we're excited to launch this year. They are big, ambitious projects, and we're only able to take them on because of support from people like you. Thank you for helping us set those more ambitious goals for wildlife and for nature. Now, I want to end on something we're working on that builds on the success of that no dumping campaign that I told you about. In the coming weeks, keep your eye out for a little underwater noise campaign. It's a very exciting campaign that we have ready for you. I think we actually have a sneak peek of that video. Let's roll that video about the underwater noise campaign.
In the darkness of the underwater world, nature creates a symphony of sounds. Marine species use sound to sense their environment. Songs, clicks, ticks, grunts, and whistles that they use to care for their young, search for food, and find mates are part of the ocean's soundtrack. Today, they're being drowned out by the sounds of human activity. The rumble from ships, deafening seismic blasts, and other human activities settle like a thick layer of smog over the natural sounds that marine life depend upon to survive. This human-made underwater noise pollution jeopardizes the survival of marine species by masking their ability to communicate and to navigate, increasing their stress levels, disrupting their normal behavior and activities, damaging their hearing, and driving away their prey. The volume in our oceans continues to be turned up, even as several whale populations swim towards extinction. With increasing ship traffic and industrial activities, more than doubling underwater noise every decade, Canada needs a strong plan to manage underwater noise pollution now. Visit wwf.ca/underwater noise to learn more.
Okay, I'm over at the laptop because I needed to come here to see the chat, and there's some great questions in there. Thank you, and I know a couple of them have been answered by some of our WWF experts. So let's see, we've got Greg. Greg, thanks for this. Why does WWF work with businesses, and how do you choose what businesses to work with? I love that question. Thank you. You know what? When I'm out in community talking to supporters, I get that question a lot because our supporters want to make sure that we're doing work with companies in a principled way. And like you, we want to make sure that we're working with companies that are serious about impact and who, like, let's be honest, who aren't just looking to work with us for greenwashing it, making it seem like they're doing something when they're not. So we're concerned with it too. And at the same time, we want companies to be part of the solution because we all have to work on biodiversity and climate together. So first of all, we have a screening process that looks at what a company's business is, what commitments they've made for climate and biodiversity, and we challenge them if those commitments aren't strong enough or if they haven't made any progress on them. Another thing that we do is, we rarely just take donations, strict donations from companies. What we want to do is enter into a partnership. We want to partner with them to be partners in conservation work, to work with companies so they can take action with us for nature and wildlife. And I think one great example is that Nature and Climate Grant program that I talked about. It's a company that sponsors a large part of that program. And that program is doing real restoration work in communities, and it's directly benefiting wildlife. So we have strict standards about who we work with and in what way, and we're excited to partner with companies to make sure we're having real impact together. I hope that answers your question. Thanks, Greg, for asking it, and thanks also for being concerned with this. It's really important. Okay, Yusuf. Yusuf asks, how is WWF Canada doing specifically on Regenerate Canada goals? Yes, I love accountability. Excellent. All right. So remember, this is a 10-year plan. We are just in the first 3 years of this plan. So I'm going to talk about where we're at, and I'm also going to talk about where we project we'll be. Okay, so what we've achieved in our projections. So on restoration, I gotta be honest, that's the toughest one, okay? Restoration is often tracked in meters, not in kilometers. It's really challenging work. So what we've achieved and in progress is nearly 20,000 hectares. That's far from 1 million, right? But I'm going to say it's a little slow to start, and we are learning in real time. We're testing out ideas, we're adjusting, and I think we're going to get there. This is also really expensive work, so we're actively fundraising with it, and we're working hard with our partners to get this work on track for 2030. Now, stewardship, remember we pledged 100 million hectares. So achieved and in progress is 102.9 million hectares. So you might be thinking, oh my God, that's the goal. We're done. We're not done. There's still a lot of work to do. It's not just about getting a protection designation and forgetting about it. We have to make sure that it's stewarded. We need to increase in marine protection as well. There's a lot more work for us to do. So we have to push, and it's going to be some pretty exciting results. Okay, carbon reduction, remember 30 million tons is our goal, and achieved and in progress, we're at almost 20 million tons. So, 2/3 of the way towards our goal. And we're really going to be working hard to make sure that we keep advancing that work. So thanks for the accountability question. I love it. All right. Jerome wants to know native plants. Does it really work? Great question. I get people saying, yeah, I planted a purple coneflower on my balcony, but does it really make a difference? Yes, it does make a difference. Okay, so one plant, is just one plant. But the thing is, your neighbors are planting one plant. The schoolyard has a dozen plants. The backyard behind the church or the mosque, they're doing plants. It all adds up. And if you live in an apartment, for example, well, I want you to know that pollinators can get up to 7 stories. So even what you're planting on your balconies, it adds up. And you might feel like you're all alone out there in this. I'm going to encourage you to check out our webpage, Regrow, because when you log into Regrow, you can log the actions that you're taking, and you can see actions from your neighbors. And that's when we can really start to see the impact that we're having. So it really matters. Keep planting that one plant, keep it alive, give it some TLC, and it's all part of the habitat that we're trying to create in some of our urban spaces. Okay. Thank you for your questions. If I didn't get to yours right now, get in touch by email or social. And I know we do, like I said, we've got some WWF experts in the chat, and they can answer those questions as well. So I'm just about to close, and I want to leave you with this thought. You know, sometimes I get asked to speak at events, or I'm interviewed by a journalist, and I got to tell you, when I'm at those events and it comes to the Q&A, the first question, the hand goes up and someone asks, what can I do? And I'm going to tell you, you are doing it already. You are showing up. You are tuning in. You are taking action. You're making a difference, and you're helping us to reverse what seems irreversible. You're helping us to get to a future that has more wildlife than we have today. That's a future with the climate imbalance. The challenge is great, right? There is always more to do. So if you are inspired enough to say, okay, I know I'm doing something by showing up, but what more can I do? I have some suggestions for you. First of all, I'm asking you to continue your financial support of WWF Canada and consider increasing it if you're able. I mean, I've shown you the impact today that you're having for wildlife. Now imagine what we'd be able to do together if we were all able to give a little bit more. Really importantly, we love it when you participate in our campaigns. I mentioned the underwater noise petition that's going to be coming out in a few weeks. Please watch for it, sign it, send it to your friends and families. By signing it, you're being a champion for wildlife, but how about you be a champion for that petition and getting as many names as possible on it? We really need your help with that. I mentioned Regrow, our native plant gardening program. You can always sign up for that and keep your eye out. We've got some new opportunities to engage with us on that later in the spring. I also want to say that learning is taking action, right? Like that's the first step, is to learn. So why not learn more about what we're doing by subscribing to our monthly newsletter? It's called Field Notes, and you can read Q&As with our conservation experts and hear about our successes and challenges in real time. Okay, this is geographically specific, but if you are in Toronto or you're planning a visit, you could also visit our beautiful Regenerate Canada immersive experience room at Arcadia Earth. There you can learn more about how we can get on track to a better future, and gotta tell you, $2 from every ticket comes to support WWF Canada's conservation work. And finally, you can sign up for the Climb for Nature. Now, you may notice I didn't say the CN Tower Climb for Nature. Yes, the CN Tower Climb for Nature is happening in April in Toronto, but for the first time ever, we are expanding and we are going to be in Vancouver at a soon-to-be-named location. Stay tuned. And we're also encouraging people to do a climb, a do-it-yourself climb anywhere that you are in Canada. So keep your eye out for that. That's a lot. That's a lot. So there are your marching orders. With that, I can't say thank you enough. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting us. And thank you for being a champion for nature.